Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
Disclaimer, this presentation was produced and funded in whole with federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education under contract number GS10F0112J with the American Institute for Research, AIR. Carolyn Limpia serves as the contracting officer's representative. The content of this presentation does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Education, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. And again, welcome today's LINKS event, Teaching Adult English Learners, Principles and Practices. I'll hand it over to our moderator, Marcella.
Thanks so much, Long, and thanks to everyone for joining today. For those of you who are new to our Universal TA webinars, our technical assistance webinars, just wanted to share with you a little bit of information about them. So as I said, today's session is part of the LINKS Universal Technical Assistance Wednesday webinar series. We hold this monthly series the last Wednesday of every month. So if this is your first time joining, I hope you'll join us next month again. This monthly series is on topics that matter the most to the field. So the idea behind it is to support states in building their capacity on areas that are important to them. And we record all of these webinars, as Long mentioned, and we will make them available on the LINKS YouTube channel. Before we jump in, and before I turn it over to Betsy, I wanted to share with you some resources that are available through LINKS that are related to this topic. We have in our LINKS resource collection, something I wanted to highlight is a fairly new to our collection resource on related to the remote ESOL project. We also have some LINKS state resources, specifically Teaching the Skills That Matter toolkit, and we have some suites of resources through the LINKS ESL Pro project. We also have the LINKS community. We have two groups there. We have the English Language Acquisition group and our professional development group. So if this topic is really of interest to you, we encourage you to check those out. On the screen, you will see the QR codes for accessing the resource collection, accessing the federal initiatives page, and for joining a community group. So we encourage you to check out those resources that are available through LINKS, in addition to our courses. So Betsy, if we can go to the next slide. If you're interested in finding this course, enrolling in this course, or any of the 28 courses that we have available through LINKS, that we have the QR code to do that available on this screen, as well as a screenshot of where on our LINKS main page to find the courses. So we encourage you to check that out. And I think that with that, that's all of our background information. I want to, on the next slide, just introduce you to Betsy Parrish, who is a professor in the MA TESOL division. Is that the right word?
Program.
Thanks, Betsy.
Yeah.
At Hamline University. Betsy?
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for being here today. As Marcella said, I teach at Hamline University in our MA TESOL, and I also run our adult education programs. We have certificates for adult ESL, adult basic ed, and a license in ABE in Minnesota. And I just love being involved in these LINKS projects, like this one in particular. And for the past 30 years, I've run a pre-service TEFL certificate, and I'm the co-founder of our Minnesota PD Center Atlas. So these experiences have really informed the work that I'm going to share with you today with this new LINKS course, Teaching Adult English Learners Principles and Practices. So our agenda is I'll provide an overview of the course, taking a look at the content, some of the objectives, giving you kind of an idea of what you can expect, and also how you might use this. I'll talk about that at the beginning, and then again at the end, we'll talk about that more extensively. I want to take you through some samples from the course. We're going to sample some activity types from the course and give you a chance to interact with those through, the chat, and that we're raising your hand and sharing on mic. And then at the end, we'll talk about ways to use the LINKS courses in general, this one in particular, for working with teachers who may be new to adult English language teaching. All right. So this course is called Teaching Adult English Learners Principles and Practices. And the idea of this is it's for teachers who are fairly new to the field. Oops, excuse me. Let me go back. Let me stick with that slide for a minute. Imagine that you have a new teacher, and here's what you'll read. The description of this course on the LINKS page is, are you new to teaching adult English learners? Do you want to maximize your instruction to best reach your English learners? This new course was designed for you. So as you're listening to me today, think about that. Which of your teachers might answer in the affirmative to those questions? For whom might this be most useful in your state? All right. So the Teaching Adult English Learners Principles and Practice course might be one of the most useful courses for those who are very new to teaching adult English learners, those who want to learn how to meet adult learner needs. It's also designed to support understandings of instructional strategies. So again, understanding of and some practice with some instructional strategies with the ultimate goal of optimizing learning for adult English learners. So hopefully through the course, those who participate in the course will be able to identify and apply appropriate instructional strategies. And they'll also strengthen their skills as an instructor at managing classes, and whether that's in person or online. We'll take a closer look at the course, the content for each unit, but let's start with a warm-up. Let's get a sense of your ideas about what effective English language teaching can look like. So we'd like you to share in the chat, what do you want to see happening when you walk into an adult English language acquisition class? So many of you are in roles where you might observe teachers, you might do site visits, you might work with supervisors, managers. What do you hope to see when you walk into an English language classroom? So students talking, I'll just comment on a few things. Let's see. Yeah, I want to hear anyone but the teacher talking most of the time, Janet shares. Absolutely. Engagement. I see the word engagement here already 3 times. What else? Let's take a student-centered. Exactly. Excuse me. We have 1 or 2 more ideas. We've got this theme of engagement, student relevance, right? Collaboration. Absolutely. Absolutely. All of the things that we see here with student-centered, students doing the talking, students doing the work, they square exactly with what this course focuses on. All right, so I think those are kind of our big ideas. And again, I think they're very much in keeping with what you're going to hear about in this in particular course. All right. So, but now again, before we do that, we're going to have a short discussion, and I'll give you a moment to think about the question. And then if you could just raise your hand and open your mic. When you think about the teachers in your state, what challenge do teachers in your state face when teaching adult English learners? So we know what we hope to see happening when we walk into a classroom. From your experiences, what challenges do teachers in your state face? So we'll put that question in the chat for you too. And okay, so you can chat, yes, thank you, Hades, got us started in the chat here. So language barriers, if anyone wants to raise their hand and open their mic. Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to click. I think I clicked ahead by mistake, sorry. Sorry.
Chrissy, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. What happened? Am I muted?
No. Can you hear me?
There we go. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So I think one of the things we hear in our state, I'm in Pennsylvania, is
Mhm.
that, our teachers are doing the teaching in the classroom, but the students need a lot of other support. And so we work with a lot of different providers to help with that support, whether it be transportation, childcare, whatever. So
Mhm.
what I hear often is that the partners don't always know how to talk and explain things well to the students. So they're trying to
Ah.
connect the students with these supports that will keep them
Mm.
coming to class.
Mhm.
But sometimes that other partner staff needs support and understanding our English language learners to better follow through and keep those supports going.
That is such a very important point to raise here. This course, actually, I would argue that this might be an ideal course for support staff to actually take to build a better understanding of what an English learner is facing as they start this journey of learning the language. They might build some skills on how to check understanding when they're doing intake, how to modify or simplify their language. So see what you think. Keep that question or that comment in mind as we're going forward, because I think it's kind of like when I do workshops for faculty at Hamline on better serving diverse populations of undergraduate students, which I do a lot. It's the same sort of thing where those in your sites could take this class for that purpose. Yeah. Diversity of the learner types, multi-level I'm seeing in the notes. How about one more? Let's hear one or two more comments from the group. What are some other challenges? So we have diversity in terms of the first language, also in terms of levels of language overall. You have the challenge of teaching some one-on-one individual lessons. Okay, anything else? Janet, you talk about LESLA, the emergent literacy, pre-literate, emergent readers. And that's often in the case that you have students with that profile in the same class as others who have a more advanced literacy, right? So SLIFE. So yeah, students with limited interrupted formal education, right? Effects of trauma, yes. So some of these topics are touched on in the class, maybe not explored quite as deeply, but there are ideas and references provided for where you can learn more. So keep these issues and concerns in mind. The hope is that the course addresses some of these challenges. So, think about that as you're going forward. Do you think this would help to fill in some of those gaps in your state? So this course is comprised of 5 units, and each unit includes a video presentation. It has interactive activities such as case studies and knowledge checks. And when I say interactive, I'll get to that more, but it's really the idea that hopefully people could be doing this in a cohort, or they could find a partner to work through the course with. But if nothing else, they're interacting sort of with themselves, as you'll see in a while. There's a pause and think task, an ongoing task that people do while they're viewing. There are opportunities to reflect and think about how this might apply in the classes where teachers are already teaching. Other opportunities, at the end of each unit, there's an assessment that participants need to complete in order to gain their certificate. And then to get started, they do a self-assessment that they revisit at the end of the course as well. All right. So Unit 1, Understanding Adult English Learners. In this particular unit, participants learn about background and experiences that can influence adult English learners' path to communicating effectively in English. And you've already highlighted some of those. So learners bring many, many strengths, and they bring funds of knowledge that we are going to build on and really take an assets-based approach. There can at the same time be some challenges that we want to consider. So by the end of the unit, we can name some of those factors that affect learning, recognize how to build on English learners' existing knowledge and experiences in our instruction, and then think of ways to assess the needs of adult English learners in order to then shape instruction that is highly learner-centered and culturally inclusive. So what does that look like? Central to this unit is the presentation and analysis of 3 learner vignettes or case studies that we're going to explore shortly as one of our sample activities. So Unit 1 is the foundational piece of sort of defining defining what learner-centered teaching and culturally inclusive instruction looks like, and also understanding the many factors that contribute to the learner profiles of students that are going to be in your classes. In Unit 2, addressing the language needs of adult English learners, learners learn about the concept of communicative competence and what that means for adult English learners to develop their communicative competence in English. In other words, learning language is much more than just learning grammar. That's just one area of communicative competence. That's linguistic competence. But we also have sociolinguistic competence, understanding kind of social purposes for using language. We have discourse competence, being able to understand and unpack more complex texts, whether written or oral. And we have strategic competence, like helping learners know how to learn on their own. So they should be able to identify the language and skills needed for success in today's world, and then create objectives that address these communication needs and that also align with rigorous standards. All right, so that's Unit 2. In Unit 3, effective strategies for teaching adult English learners, now we really dig into the classroom practices more explicitly. So participants learn about communicative teaching principles and practices. And by the end of this unit, they should be able to recognize effective instructional strategies for adult English learners through observing and reflecting on sample lessons, and then describe ways to integrate critical thinking skills into any lesson. And as we'll see in our sample activities, one of the central ways of achieving these objectives is through taking people into classrooms with video and observation activities and reflection. Unit 4, optimizing learning for adult English learners, is where participants learn about techniques and strategies for maximizing student interaction and engagement. By the end of this unit, they should be able to identify characteristics of a multi-level class and various learner profiles found in English language classrooms, or potential profiles, the kind of the factors that we want to consider, and then determine strategies for working with multi-level classes, describe and apply a process for differentiating instruction to meet varying learner needs. So we will also we'll see a sample activity from this unit. We close the course with highlighting the importance of continued professional development. So in Unit 5, participants will explore the importance of collaborating and engaging with their colleagues, with peer teachers, to continue their professional growth. And by the end of the unit, they should be able to explain the importance of creating professional development goals for themselves, and then also ways to find and use the LINCS professional development resources for teaching adult English learners. And those are not the only resources we recommend, but we really highlight all that LINCS has to offer and help the participants think of how to align those with some of their personal or professional goals. All right, so now let's dig into some of the activities from the course so you can get a sense of what these look like and how they might be used. And with that, I also want you to be thinking right away. Imagine, again, think about those teachers that I said, think about a teacher that would say yes to some of those questions, like, are you new to teaching? And also think about some of the challenges that we talked about before. See the ways in which you might apply this in your own setting. Where might these activities be most useful? Would it be at the program level, the classroom level? Would it be when people are going out to observe a new teacher? Would it be in the volunteer training that you do? So I'll look at each of those possibilities more closely and very intentionally at the end, but I want you to be thinking about that throughout. How could you use this course in your state? So there were 3 key principles central to the design of all of the activities and tasks in the class. First of all is interactivity, and the interactivity is with self, with the materials, and with others. And this happens through the pause and think tasks, the reflection prompts, and then invitations to consult with others that are woven throughout the course. So again, you know, if people are doing this individually, there is a way to make it more interactive, right? But you could also think about ways of using this with a cohort of new teachers in your state so that there could be more robust interactivity. The other key principle was the use of classroom video to bring participants into real classrooms. One of the things we know from literature on professional development is that teachers can really benefit from models and modeling. Having those videos is a great way to provide those examples or those kind of exemplars. And it's not so much to prescribe exactly what people should do, but we know that new teachers can really benefit from having samples from which they can draw ideas and make them their own in their context and make sure that they're appropriate for their context. So there are numerous sample lessons and then instructional strategies presented throughout the lessons. Okay. Now, one of the things that I want to highlight here now is that sort of the uses. So the activities in the course, I think you'll find are ideal for ongoing reflection. So for example, a participant may be a new volunteer. They could try something out right away in their practice and then reflect on the impact that had on student learning. I think the materials here are great for peer observation. You're going to see that there are many reflection tasks and video observation tasks as well. And you could use them then as you go and observe a peer and see how are we trying out similar practices in our own settings. The other thing too is sort of self-observation where teachers can audio or video record themselves, but again, using some of the tasks and tools that we're going to see here today. All right. I would want to just reiterate that ideally, it would be great if you could get groups of teachers working through this course together in the form of a community of practice, professional learning community, or a study circle. And one thing too, I want to say is that it could be that it could be a group of, for example, ABE teachers, adult basic ed teachers who are new to serving English learners in their classes. They might use this course as a way to learn more about a learner population that they're not as familiar with. Or it could be teachers coming back after an absence from teaching for a while. So now let's dig in. So as I mentioned earlier, foundational to Unit 1 are the 3 case studies. So the participants work through these 3 learner profiles or case studies to help them recognize the diversity of learners' backgrounds and needs. The thing too is, when I say they're foundational, we refer back to the case studies throughout the course in later units. So we kind of use these as a grounding activity for the course, as a thread. And so as we look at things like optimizing learning and classroom management strategies, we might circle back then to some of the things that we think about or generate in this early unit. So let's meet Aden. We'll meet Aden from Somalia, Inez from Ecuador, and Carlos from Mexico. So we're going to see that some learners are refugees, or some are seeking economic stability, and others may have limited prior formal schooling, as you mentioned in our preview there. You talked about Slife or Lesla. So if we look at Aden, for example, we're going to learn about him in more detail in a moment. He has a job and he's working to develop his literacy skills in English, but he does have interrupted prior formal schooling. Inez has a job in housekeeping, but her goal is to get her high school equivalency and one day become a nurse. And Carlos has come to the United States with a credential as a math teacher. So he wants to find out how he can be re-credentialed. What are his needs? So each of these learner profiles are the basis for the 3 case studies. So now we're going to hear about Aden. And with that, we have some questions for you to think about that Long is going to put in the chat. As you listened, what are this learner's goals? So what are Aden's goals? Now those might be explicitly stated, but they may also be, inferred, things that you could infer. What strengths does he bring to the classroom? What might be some challenges? And what are some of his language needs? All right, so be thinking about answers to those questions, and then we'll just elicit a few afterwards in the chat or with your mics on. So Auden came to the United States 9 years ago as a refugee when he was 19 years old. Prior to coming to the United States, he experienced interrupted formal schooling, attending school for just 3 years in a refugee camp, and acquiring minimal literacy skills in his own language. Auden is now married and has 4 school-aged children. He works as an attendant in a parking garage and attends English classes 3 mornings a week. Because of his limited literacy skills, he's been placed in a beginning level English language acquisition class. However, he has strong oral language skills and is quite confident communicating with teachers and people in his community. His dream is to achieve a high school equivalency diploma. All right, so let's use the chat. And what are one or two of Auden's goals? And again, we could state the really obvious one that's stated at the end, but what could you infer perhaps? What are some other goals that you might infer? And you can read, okay, so get his high school diploma. Let's hear one or two others. I mean, so thinking about his minimal literacy, that's one thing I just really want to highlight here. And you think about his goals. So, okay, probably higher income, fluency, better jobs, absolutely, right? Right. Good, great. Okay, help his kids, right? Absolutely, yep. What strengths does he bring to the classroom? So obvious. Right. So, and Elizabeth, you mentioned develop both his English literacy in English and in his first language, right? So what strengths does he bring? Confidence, motivation, absolutely. What else? Strong oral skills, exactly. He's a natural talker, grit. One of the things about oral skills, I mentioned it in the course, and actually, I mentioned this in a lot of other venues, but we can really start with oral skills, that strength of his, and build from there. Patsy Egan and I have a chapter in a book from University of Michigan Press on using oral language as a bridge to academic writing, specifically for learners who have less prior formal schooling. Education really seems to be a priority for him, absolutely. What might be a challenge? What might be some challenges? Time, absolutely. It takes a long time to acquire these skills, as we know, and you'll learn about, I mean, we talk about it in the course, you know, it takes upwards of 7 to 10 years to really develop the kind of academic literacy we might need in order to say pass a credential or go on to community college. So I don't know if that's what you were talking about necessarily, but does he have time to study, but also the time it takes to acquire those goals, right? Time to attend school, work, family demands, absolutely. He may have experienced some trauma, very likely. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Okay, and then what are some language needs that really, and we've already said some of these. Yeah, and it's certainly math skills. I mean, it's not only the language skills. I see you mentioned that. I lost track of the name there. Let's see. Yeah, Johnny, thank you. So what are some of his language needs? And we've already mentioned literacy development above. Anything else stand out for you before we go on? Okay. So written language skills, right? Writing and reading, right? Exactly. All right. Thank you all so much for your active participation here. This is super helpful. All right, so now in this case study, for each case study, we provide a very detailed response with a full account of what would Auden ultimately need to achieve his goal of attaining his high school equivalency. And we sort of name the different literacy and academic language skills he's going to need. But here are just some of the goals that we might be able to infer from the case study. Okay, so he may need to read documents sent home from his children's school. He has to read work documents, support his children's academic achievement. He has to take he would probably most likely want to take part in community activities and events. And then, as we said, he ultimately wants to complete a high school equivalency diploma and attain a higher paying job. So these are all things that you talked about. So like all learners, he needs instruction that is highly learner-centered, like really geared to his particular needs, but is also rigorous. Which means that there's rich content, that there's really robust language development and critical thinking. So the units in the course provide the supports for what that can look like in the classroom. So we're going to now turn to another core task in the unit, in Unit 1, that's very foundational for the course overall. So Long has just shared with you, it's called the Unit 1 Checklist of Learner-Centered and Culturally, and Inclusive Teaching Practices. All right. This checklist of learner-centered inclusive teaching practices from Unit 1 really previews many of the themes that will be shared in the course. So this screen shows us a screenshot of a portion of that checklist. All right. So I use this checklist with teachers of all backgrounds, actually. I use it with English language teachers, adult basic education teachers, and I also, as I alluded to earlier, I use this with content area faculty here at Hamline to think about how their instruction is learner-centered and inclusive. So for new teachers, for example, volunteers who don't have a lot of experience to draw on yet, they can use this checklist as they observe classes live or in the suggested videos in the course. But the purpose of this core task in Unit 1, this foundational task, is to help to define what learner-centered teaching can look like and doing it by example. All right. So rather than simply defining each principle, have teachers think for themselves really critically, what would this look like? For example, if the activate learners' knowledge and experiences, what does that look like? All right. Having teachers work through the checklist in the course is a great way for them to identify their strengths as teachers, but also to reveal any gaps or areas that they really hadn't thought about and that they could explore more deeply. Let me share some examples when I did the checklist myself, and you can be thinking about this for yourself as an educator as well. So for example, the first principle, activate learners' knowledge and experiences. So what can that mean in the classroom? Well, for example, I know that not everybody loves KWL, but I think KWL, what do you know, what do you want to learn, and what did you learn, is a really simple way to implement this principle very systematically. By asking learners what they already know about a topic, we're activating their prior knowledge. And we're also acknowledging their how they want to connect learning to their own lives and experiences when they ask them, what do they want to learn? As you know, you circle back at the end of your lesson or your unit to what did you learn? So this also gives learners a chance to kind of self-reflect. It's a great way for them to sort of set the course for their learning for a particular learning unit of learning. So it's, in essence, I mean, just by definition, a highly learner-centered practice. It's inclusive as well, because it's acknowledging that each learner brings different strengths and different experiences to every classroom, right? The next one, give learners choices and active roles in the classroom. An example from my practice, for example, would be to give students choice of readings on one topic. Great sources for that are places like, Newsela, if you use that, where you have leveled readings or you have different readings on similar topics. You can also, another example of this would be providing role assignments in group activities, having somebody be the facilitator, somebody be the timekeeper, somebody be the scribe, somebody be the group reporter. Okay, so these are they're concrete examples. Or view the learner's first language and culture as resources for learning. That's the third principle on the checklist. So examples from my practice would be, for example, having like language groupings. So students can support one another, clarify things in their home language, their first language. Or readings in their first language or drafting in their first language. For example, let's suppose you're using project-based learning and you want learners to delve into, they've chosen to delve into a topic where there are lots of resources in their first language, their home language, that are deeper, provide more content than they could access yet in English. So why not do that research in their first language and then they can craft their final product in English? Or I have a teacher candidate in the MA TESOL right now. She's a high school teacher. She teaches science, and she has her English learners draft their experiment reports in their first language with a partner first, just to make sure they can clarify with one another that they really understand what happened. They really understand the results. And she's found that the quality of their reports that they write in English has really increased as a result of that practice. So again, the idea here, and this could be done through, teachers observing a video, looking for examples. But ideally, this is a great one to be able to do as with others, like complete the checklist and then do it with others to compare and get ideas, as we'll talk about here more in a minute. Okay. All right. So so my question for you, and I'd love it if we got some hands up and we can share some ideas. As you've seen, Unit 1 is foundational, and key to it is this idea of learner-centered inclusive teaching practices, using the case studies as a foundation for that, and then moving into these concrete principles. How do you convey expectations about learner-centered and inclusive teaching practices in your state? What are some ways that you do that? I'll give you a minute of think time. That's kind of a hefty, it's a question that takes a little thought, but what are some things that you're currently doing to convey these kinds of expectations about learner-centered inclusive teaching? And when you're ready, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'd love to hear a few ideas. And please feel free to use the chat as well, but it's great to hear your voices. And I have really excellent wait time, so I'm not going to let you off the hook here. All right. All right. It's getting a little long. I know we're recording. Okay. So professional development activities that model both. Excellent suggestion, Joan. Teachers share what they're doing in their professional learning communities. Katrina shared. Excellent, right? And can you see how you could use something like this checklist as a vehicle, as a tool, right, for having teachers reflect and think about these topics? Good, wonderful. Let's hear maybe one more idea. Or just keep that thought. We're going to go into breakout rooms in a bit here to discuss the application of some of these tasks. So maybe save that thought. All right. Goal setting with students. That's excellent. Yes, that's absolutely, Amanda. That's absolutely a highly learner-centered principle. And I think if you take a look at the checklist, I think that one really responds to item 2, make instruction relevant to learners' needs and interests. And how do we do that? We do it through goal setting, for example. So again, the checklist gives us this tool. It's a vehicle for getting teachers to think really critically about these items and then share and exchange ideas and examples. All right. Now let's take a look at another type of activity that you're going to find in the unit. In the units. Okay. So throughout the units, we've woven in video observation tasks. And again, the idea here is to help teachers see what a classroom can look like if they're new to teaching, completely new to teaching, and really bring the principles to life. Okay, so we're not just reading about it, we're not just looking at a written lesson plan, but they're actually seeing these in action. These are the 4 core videos. We use one on teaching reading. We have excerpts from reading, one on contextualized grammar instruction, so a contextualized grammar lesson. We have a video excerpt on effective grouping strategies, and then one on modeling and demonstrating instructions. So the first two, the reading and the contextualized grammar lessons, are in Unit 3, which looks at the instructional strategies, and the next two are in Unit 4 on optimizing learning. Okay, now these videos come from a series, and it's New American Horizons. You may have seen that or used that. I was one of the developers, along with Marianne Flores, for the New American Horizons Foundation. And what's exciting and fun is that it has the same spirit as this material or this work, which is that it's the mission and the goal of that series was to provide free, hopefully high quality materials for new teachers or volunteers to bring people into the classroom. So we're so delighted that we had permission to continue to use those in this course and take excerpts from those. In each of the units, you'll have the link to the full video. So if teachers in your states want to look at the entire video, each one is about 30 minutes, they can do that. All right. So, but what's key to any kind of viewing or listening is that you have a task. So for each of the videos, there's a video observation task like this one. So this is a screenshot of the video observation task for effective grouping strategies. So grouping strategies help learners achieve the following. It helps them to, have authentic interactions with others. It's a way to focus. Any group activity can really help to focus on fluency and communicating meaning, or developing that communicative competence that I mentioned earlier. It also is important to give them a diversity of partners and contexts and tasks, and then practice using their collaborative skills. So let's take a look at how a task like this can work. I'm going to take you now to one of the videos. We're just going to watch about a minute of it to give you a sample to see what the teachers could do. As they watch, they have to identify the grouping strategy used. And then where is there evidence of any of these principles? How are those principles above on the handout addressed through the sample? So here we go. I'm going to share again. Oops. Oop. All right. Share sound. All right. All right. So what was the strategy, and then what are the benefits, or what impacts does that strategy have?
Mixing ability levels within pairs or groups works well when tasks involve multiple steps, and both less proficient and more proficient learners can support each other naturally in contributing to task achievement. As Cheryl's group of learners with different language abilities reassemble sentence strips into paragraphs, some learners immediately engage in the task, while others absorb thought processes being modeled and then contribute as they are ready.
My work experience in my country and here.
First.
Whoops, I'm sorry. So,
Check out this verbo.
oh, sorry. All right, so I was just trying to share, I was trying to pause that, not stop it altogether. So what stood out for me there was that the teacher in the sample was very, very intentional about grouping by different levels so that learners could, excuse me, 1 second here. I'll just check in with Long. Do we have the right view here? Yeah.
Go ahead and switch it.
Okay, thank you. All right, are we good now? Thank you. So what I noticed was, because the teacher made the decision to group students intentionally, really thinking about grouping them by some with certain types of strengths. Maybe some have higher literacy skills or higher competence in, say, grammar, and then some have higher oral skills. What I noticed right away was that they were interacting very actively. So it had the benefit, or it had the plus of promoting fluency, communicating meaning to do this task. So in other words, each sample gives the new teacher, a chance to reflect very purposefully on these particular principles. So again, that was just a quick sample. So the other videos that you will share with teachers, you can share with teachers in the course, take them into, say, a reading lesson. And here, the teachers are asked to look for examples in the video that show how to activate students' prior knowledge on the topic. What do they do for pre-reading? How do they promote different reading strategies? So what do they do in order to practice, say, reading for specific information or just reading for gist? So you'll notice that the tasks have lots of blank space, and that is by design. I don't want teachers to come into teaching English language classes thinking that there's one way to do it or that we're prescribing a way to teach. We really want to learn about principles that inform our practices. So while there are many different models and clear examples, we also want to give the participant in the course the opportunity to think deeply about what they're observing and interpret it through their own lens and their own experiences. So now we are going to go into a breakout room for you to think about the value of classroom or video observation for adult language teaching and what observation practices are common in your state. All right, so what is the value of classroom or video observations for adult educators? Consider the different roles that adult educators have and how observation might be valuable in each of those roles. And then consider what observation practices are common and specific, and also think about what have you seen here in my overview of the course that might be of value for you in your state. All right. Before we send you to breakout rooms, are there any questions or do we need to clarify anything for you here? Otherwise, Long is going to put you in breakout rooms. We'll give you about 8 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. I'll go ahead and start the
There's
breakout rooms.
Another. And all, you could please choose one person who's going to be one idea from group, the chat, or with my son. Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start the breakout rooms, Betsy.
Thank you.
Everyone should be back into the main room now.
Yep, thank you. And I will reshare my PowerPoint here. All right. Now, do I need to switch screens here or am I good? What?
You are good.
I'm good to go. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's share. Okay, let's share what you discussed. And again, we can use the chat or the reporter can raise their hand and open their mics. But what was something that stood out for you about the value of using these classroom videos, observation as a tool, and what practices are you using in your state? So again, we'll let me get my chat open so I can see you coming in. Let's see. Oh, here, whoops, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Chat. All right. Just a second here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see. Oh, Philomena.
Philomena, right?
Yes, yeah. So what did you
figure it out myself? I'm using an iPad and I normally use my computer, so everything's different here.
Mm-hmm.
What we talked about was using the observation, like observing other teachers in their teaching to learn different practices from what you are used to on a regular basis, or to learn new skills. Yes. Or if you're learning like a new practice, a new something or other, then you would do that by observing someone who is skilled in that area. And that's how you learn how to teach that way. What practices are common in your state? So some of the participants said that when they have new teachers, they have them work with a mentor.
Great.
They would observe the mentor teaching, and then eventually the mentor observes them and gives them feedback.
Wonderful.
And that's how they introduce their new teachers to being able to teach properly. The
yeah.
other thing that came up that I really liked, I mean, that's like on a personal thing, was videoing yourself
Right.
teaching
Mhm.
and then going back and watching the video.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. So lots of really important ideas there. The idea of sort of mentoring, the idea of thinking of the videos also as kind of a mentor as well. Like we think about mentor text when we're teaching reading and writing, and kind of thinking of the video itself can serve that purpose. I'm going to hear from you in a second here, Amanda, a couple things that came in the chat. Patsy Egan shares, always nice to have adult learners in videos that we use with teachers, because so much of the material out there tends to be K-12. So having adult language classrooms, thank you for sharing that. And then authenticity, Katrina Berko shares here, the actual student learning, conveying techniques in a compelling and more memorable way, right? So really seeing the impact that our practices have on student learning. Amanda, how about your group? What did you want to share? And thank you so much, Philomena. Yeah, go ahead.
So at this point, I think all of our points were touched on. The authenticity part was something that we found would be really helpful. And then another participant mentioned viewing the dynamic between student and teacher, and seeing how that changes based on activities. Maybe it becomes more student or sort of how that changes. And then a third idea was, if a new educator is watching, they can almost model their first time teaching off what they've seen as like a confidence boost. You know, they don't need to have everything in a row because they've watched someone do it, and they can just repeat. And then as they get more confident, change it to their own style. So that's that's what we came up with. Yes.
Nice. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those ideas. Really, really appreciate it. So some really rich discussions and really great ideas of ways that you could see using. One thing I want to highlight is that I hope you'll find that the tasks that are in the course, the actual tasks, which if you register for the course, you can access the materials kind of ahead of time, I think. I mean, you could, look at a unit and look at the different video observation tasks. The teachers can use those same viewing tasks, as I said before, for peer observation. So for example, like you said, like having you view the video about grouping strategies, then they could use the same tool to go observe a partner or a mentor and look at, well, what are we doing? How does this work in our setting? So always trying to contextualize the work and the content from this course, okay? And that's by design. I really tried to make it as flexible as possible to really teach to those principles. And again, that's why it's called principles and practices, because I really think like teaching by principle rather than prescribing like the how you have to do it is much more productive and much more in keeping with what we know about good education. That it's always situated, it's always different depending on the context, isn't it? Right? And we have to be mindful of that. So you may not see yourself and the learners in a video, but you can see, okay, those are the principles and I'm going to try it out. Maybe I'll video, like you said, I'll video record myself. I'll observe myself. I'll observe my mentor. Thank you, everybody, so much. So now we're going to move on to our last sample activity type, and then we'll have time for some general questions overall about the course and how we might use it in your states. So one of the key features in the course is pause and think, and it's a way for the participant to reflect on their own, or they could use it with a colleague if you use this as part of site-based training or workshops. So we're going to look at an example from Unit 4 on teacher language. And excuse me, I'm going to invite you to actually engage with this task by doing a pause and then responding in the chat. All right. So we have some examples of teacher language. For example, how about if you come over and join this group? Or can anybody tell me what charitable contribution means? Or how big did you say your new dog was, Maria? As you look at those samples of teacher language, the prompt is, well, what do you notice about these examples? If you got a blank stare from an adult English learner after saying any of these things, what might you do? How might you modify your language? So, excuse me, everybody. What do you notice? And you can either raise your hand and share. And just, well, to model, give an example. For example, I see a lot of indirect language. What else do you see that might be problematic, that might make this language difficult for an English learner? We get some ideas in the chat. Yeah, so the sentence structure. And is it simple or more complex than it needs to be? More sophisticated, right? More complex than it needs to be, right? Right? Okay.
I was just going to add much more complex than it needs to be and very confusing to follow.
Absolutely. Now, if you have done teacher observation, have you noticed that a lot of times new teachers, this is how they talk? Because they talk the way they talk to their friends, or they talk the way they would talk to somebody for whom English is their first language, right? Would you all agree with that? Maybe a thumbs up? I'd say this is one of the things that I work with most with student teachers is lots of thumbs up. Yeah, their teacher language is just way too complex. They have a lot of extraneous teacher talk. So the objective for this particular portion of Unit 4 and this particular task is to call attention to that and then see how we might adjust our language accordingly. All right. All right. So now we are going to look at some revised samples and see what people notice. So instead of, how about if you come over and join the group, which is very complex and unnecessarily wordy, the teacher uses very direct language accompanied by a gesture. So for Vang, please join this group with a gesture motioning to a new group. All right. We as seasoned teachers might think, well, that's so obvious, Betsy. Believe me, it's not. I spend hundreds of hours every year observing novice teachers in our pre-service certificate programs. And I'd say that this is the number one thing that we talk about, but that also has such a positive impact, because a teacher will design a wonderful activity and it'll fall on its face. And why? Because the teacher language was way too complex, or the instructions were very unclear. All right. How about instead of saying, how big did you say your new dog is, Maria? Just ask a direct question. How big is your dog? But I think we have this habit of using indirect language because we think it's more polite or sort of hedging, but no, less is more. Now, the key here, and I hope you'll agree with my examples, is we never want to dummy down our language and make it sound babyish or inappropriate or ungrammatical. I also hear new teachers doing that. Thinking they're doing their students a favor. Absolutely not. We want to keep our language authentic, but we want to keep it clear and accessible. All right. The next example from the original slide. Well, so when giving students a definition, instead of saying, can anybody tell me what charitable contribution means? That kind of checking question just doesn't work. You're going to get a bunch of blank faces. But what if you said something like this? Last week, I took some used clothes to Goodwill. I gave some money for a fundraiser at my son's school. What do we call these actions? And then wait and see if a student knows. Okay. Yes, charitable contributions, great. The thing is that even if nobody in the class offers that, you have defined the word by example. All right. So the unit, we get really brass tacks, really down to the nitty gritty of teaching in Module 4 on those sorts of interactions in the classroom, the grouping, but also the language we use that can really promote more productive learning. How about for giving directions? Okay, so giving directions. The first thing I want you to do is to fill in your calendar sheet, mark an X where you are busy, and then stand and find someone who is free when you are. What? I mean, those are really unclear directions, aren't they? So oftentimes when teachers are giving directions to learners, they just imagine a teacher's using this calendar as an interactive activity, and they give those instructions, they're going to get a lot of blank looks from students, I can assure you. Okay, so how do we want to give instructions? Well, we use the Pause and Think handout in the module, or in the unit, excuse me, has all these prompts, and it allows the participant to work their way through the videos in the units and then stop and think a little bit before they move forward. Okay, what could we do to improve on these? Well, the idea is we always want to show, don't tell people what to do. Don't tell people, the first thing I want you to do is to fill in your calendar sheet, mark an X where you're busy, and then stand and find someone who's free when you are. Show them. For example, Jacob, which days are you busy? Ask a genuine question of a student in class, and the student says, I'm busy on Tuesday and Thursday. So the teacher marks the days that he says. Okay, so you actually show how to do the activity. And as Abigail shares here with more specific language in small bits, Kyoko, what will you do now? Instead of saying to the students, now you're going to stand up and go talk to them, ask the students, what do you think we're going to do now? And I bet you, I'll put my money on it, that the student will say, we're going to stand up and ask others when they're free. Okay, especially if you make these sorts of activities a routine in the teaching. So this particular example gives you a snapshot of what the Pause and Think activities are like throughout the course. Again, with very concrete examples of classroom practice and with opportunities for people to think about what it is they are seeing and observing throughout the course. All right. So we now have come to the close of our demonstration of some of the sample activities. I started off with an overview of the content. And in a moment here, we're going to just share a little bit about our ideas on how you might use the course in your state. But let's use this time now to answer questions that have come up about anything that you've heard or anything you've seen. What questions do you have? And feel free to use the chat or just please raise your hand and open your mic, and we will call and we'll have you speak up. Yes, thank you. So our official time for doing the course is that the course could be completed in about 3.5 hours. Well, we have 3.5 hours on the link site, and that would be a teacher using it independent or individually, doing it through self-access, working their way through the modules and doing the activities, watching the video clips and doing the observation tasks. And that would be the minimum, I would say. Ideally, if they're doing this with a partner, then of course it could be extended. Each unit could be the basis for, a 2-hour workshop that you're giving as PD with your new teachers or with volunteers at your school. Yeah. What other questions do you have?
Betsy, can I ask a question?
Of course, yeah. Oh, I can't. Yeah, I didn't see the raised hands in my view that I have here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I missed the first couple of minutes. How do you access the course?
Okay, I will we'll go back to that. Marcella, I think, is going to kind of revisit some of the, it's at the links webpage, at the links landing page, and we can circle back to that in our closing, okay?
All right, thank you very much.
It's in that, yes, thank you. Any other questions? And maybe just a moment for any reactions that you want to share, any thoughts on the usability in your state. We'll have a chance to talk about that as a whole group here in a minute, okay? So let's just look at some ways that you can utilize the links courses, including the one we just talked about. And we're going to do a poll now. I'll turn that over to Long. He's going to run a poll for us. Do you use links courses as part of your professional development offered in your state? Let's see what we show here. Yeah, so Katrina says, I like that it's broken into units so it can be addressed several times when shorter, right, when there's less time available. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so we're seeing that over half of you, yes, have used links courses as part of professional development offered in your state. About 30% not yet. So we certainly hope that this has inspired you to do so. This is such an easy to access free resource. And as I'll share here in just a moment, We'll make sure we still have a little more time to finish the poll. 13.
Betsy, while we're waiting for people to finish the poll,
Yeah.
Abigail put in the chat a question. Would it be appropriate and helpful for me to take this course if I am a teacher?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and so I'm assuming you mean maybe a teacher with more experience, or do you mean, I mean, it is for teachers. I mean, can you clarify, Abigail, is that your question? You mean someone who's got experience as opposed to a new teacher? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking it seems geared towards people who are delivering professional development courses or seminars, and I'm only a teacher.
No.
I am the teacher.
No, it's geared to you. It is absolutely geared to you. But my job today was to show the state, like for this particular session, was to show you all there's this new course that your new teachers could take. Okay. And so because of the way we've entered into it and thinking about it more for that purpose, the entire course is designed for you. It is meant for the practicing teacher. Oh, absolutely. With the models, with the observation, with reflection, with model activities. But it's not just for new teachers, as you say, Elizabeth, absolutely not. I think it's great for a refresher. I think that there's often new ideas that come up that people, I haven't done that before. I don't really know a lot about Jigsaw or information gap activities, or I actually hadn't really thought about the concept of communicative competence. That's new information to me. You know, depending on where you got your training, how you got your training, what brought you into an adult education classroom, I don't think this is only for new teachers at all, to be honest with you. I think that it's really got something for everybody. Yeah. Thank you for those questions. Was there anything else I missed there
No. But I think on your next slide, you had a little bit more.
Yes, so I'll just say a little more and then I'll turn it back over to Marcella to close. So I think, for example, in Minnesota, we do a new teacher orientation. It's offered in our institute to start off with, and people can take it there, or they can do it as kind of a kickoff, or it's done in sites. This course could become, I would argue, this could become your state new teacher orientation. I don't mean like a certificate. I know some states have certificates that they provide. That's more extensive, but I'm saying if you typically do a new teacher orientation for ESL teachers, I think this could be great for volunteer training. And again, as I said earlier, for site-based communities of practice or for peer mentoring. The tools in the course, the teachers could take it on their own, or they could be taking it with a peer mentor or taking it with someone else. And remember, it's only 3.5 hours to go and work your way through. And then it's more depending on how much you want to delve into different topics. And the what else we're going to get to in a minute. We're going to give you a chance to share ideas. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcella now.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. So for those of you who are in the state offices and thinking about how you can use this within your state so that you can access and utilize these self-paced courses with your teachers and programs. So the courses are set up so that individual users can enroll. And so you can encourage teachers in your state to do that. It's also possible to use it as part of your statewide professional development. We encourage you to, you can download it onto your personal LMS, and you can have it available to your teachers there and have them work through there. It is also up to you if you would like to provide a certificate for your teachers. We do not provide, we don't provide hours, but you can do that at the state level. So that's a decision that you can make at the state, and we highly encourage you to do that, because upon completion, teachers get a certificate that identifies the number of hours. So again, how you use that is up to you. You can download and customize the course as needed to better fit your needs. And you might have heard me mention on these webinars many times that it's possible to request technical assistance through links. And one of the ways that can look is requesting a facilitated course. So we do encourage you to take advantage of using this course in your state. If you want to get in touch with us, we're happy to help you think through a bit more how you can do that. So Betsy, I think we can go to the next slide.
Yeah. So share, and by the way, I just turned my video off because my internet said it was a little unstable, so I didn't think you needed to see my face for this. So do you have other ideas? Share an idea in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand of other ways that you could envision using this course in your state, whether you're a teacher, a practicing teacher, or as a state leader, director, or PD provider. Any other ideas that you'd like to share with us?
And Betsy, while people are putting that into the chat, I wanted to clarify that while our certificates from links do indicate the number of hours, we don't provide, we can't certify that you can use these for professional development hours or anything like that.
Right. So Joan says we could use this to complement the synchronous orientation we currently do. Absolutely. That's excellent. Using it for PD with your teachers. Absolutely. It's always available. Exactly, Joan. Yeah. And I was sharing with during the breakout time, I was sharing that already I think close to 40 people have already enrolled in the course, and as a brand new course, I think that's pretty exciting, and we hope to see those numbers go up. Yeah. By the way, I noticed that I was supposed to share the results for the poll, and I didn't. You guys, I'm just gonna. I don't know if people see that, but yes, you could include. Yes, Elizabeth, you could have people work through things and then include discussion in the team meetings from the course content. So it's sort of like a mini CO community of practice, right? Yeah, absolutely, great idea. Yeah. All right. We'll continue sharing those ideas in the chat. I'm going to go share. Should I go ahead to the next slide for you, Marcella?
That would be great, Betsy.
Yeah. Oh, the poll is here. Oh, no, that's a different poll. Is that a new poll?
This is a new poll.
Yes.
So as I mentioned a few moments ago, we are happy to provide continued support on this topic through the technical assistance that we offer through links to states to help build your capacity on this topic. And so we'd love to get your input on whether or not you are interested in continued support on this particular topic. If you can please let us know by selecting yes, maybe, or not right now. We know that you have a lot going on in your states.
So it's exciting to see a lot of interest coming in. Let me know when you want me to, yeah, when it ends.
Betsy, I'll take care of the polls.
Okay, thank you.
All right, maybe just one or two more people.
Marcella, right. I think we're good.
I think so too. That's great. Thanks so much for taking the time to answer that, and let us know if you're interested. We can get in touch and keep that in mind as we're moving forward with our plans for technical assistance. All right, if we can go to the next slide.
So, all right, so a lot of enthusiasm there. Okay, so Marcella, should I continue?
Yes,
yeah, the next slide, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so as I mentioned earlier, again, through links, we have training and technical assistance opportunities on the screen. You'll just see our flyer that specifies some of our professional development opportunities that we have through links. The flyer also indicates different topics that we provide technical assistance on, and long shared in the chat the link to our state resources where you can the the request form that you can use to request technical assistance. Next slide, please. All right. So in addition to this fantastic course that Betsy helped to developed, we have a few more new links courses that I wanted to share with you. And I forget who it was had asked how to access our courses. On this screen, you will see the QR code that you can use to join a course Long also put that in the chat, the link to join those. But the new courses that I wanted to share with you are our Adult Career Pathways, Building Strategic Partnerships, Engaging Employers, our ACP, Building a Bridge to Adult Career Pathways, and ACP, Instructional Considerations for Adult Career Pathways. And of course, listed here is also the current course, Teaching Adult Education, Adult English Learners, Principles and Practices. All right, so as we wrap up, I wanted to tell you about next month's webinar. I hope that you will join us. It's a very exciting webinar. It's the U.S. Citizenship and Immigrant Services, or USCIS, Adult Citizenship Education Program Development Guide will be the topic for our webinar. For those of you who are ESL teachers or who work in programs where you focus on citizenship education, I think this will be incredibly relevant for you in particular. Our presenters will be Mary Flores and Sean Chakrabarty from USCIS. I hope you'll join us again. It'll be the same time as today, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, or noon to 1:30 p.m. for those of you who are on the West Coast. We hope that you'll register now, and Long put the link to that in the chat. We want to make sure that we meet your needs. So if you have any specific questions about this topic, please put those into the chat so that we can make sure to get those to Mary and Sean in advance, and they can make sure to address those for you.
Okay.
All right. And with that, I want to thank you for attending today's webinar. Christina asked in the chat, I sometimes have trouble finding the announcements for upcoming events. Do you have any tips? Christina, if you could please email me, I'll put my email in the chat. Or I think I can email you. We can be in touch about that. So thank you everyone for joining today. Betsy, as always, you're wonderful. Thank you for
thank you
and presenting for us.
You're welcome. And as I'm saying in my chat here, just thanks for the active participation, everybody. I got some wonderful ideas from you all. And it's heartening to see that there you can see some applications for your settings. So thank you so much for being here.